So, Grant, we've talked about, last will and testaments. We've talked about revocable living trusts, and contrasting this next topic with the revocable living trust, which the revocable trust you set up, during life, in advance. You retitle your assets. One of the primary goals is avoiding probate. Um, can you talk a little bit about testamentary trust, and especially as a contrast to revocable trust?
Sure. So, with a testamentary trust, it's exactly what it sounds like, a trust that is set up within your will, and essentially it takes effect upon your death and then the probate of the will. So, there's a couple nice things about that. I mean, number one, with the revocable living trust or revocable trust that we'll talk about in a minute, you're creating that ahead of time. And so, one of the nice things about the testamentary trust, and this is really true of the revocable living trust too, because it's revocable and can be changed. But you have time, I mean, in terms of being able to change up your will up to the point of your death, obviously. And so, if you have trust terms or other testamentary terms that you don't like, you can constantly go back and forth and switch those, change them, delete them, whatever needs to happen. So, with the testamentary trust, there's a lot of different possibilities with what you can do. But my, personal thought on it is the biggest benefit is that you can kind of direct with more specificity where assets are going, when they go, at what age you might make distributions, whether it's income or principal. There's a lot of different possibilities there. For instance, you might have a child that you want to give your estate to, but you realize that until they hit a certain age, they just don't have the maturity to take care of that yet. So you can set up a trust within your will, a testamentary trust that provides that they won't, be able to touch those funds until they're 30, let's say. But in the meantime, the trustee that you set up, again, somebody you trust, and again, a corporate trustee is a great option here. They can be managing those funds and making sure that the principal is growing, but also make principal and or income distributions to that beneficiary so that they are getting the benefit of the estate you've left for them, but they're not able to get to all of it at one time. That's also a great thing because it helps avoid creditors. And if creditors are a problem, then you can be making distributions to them where you're getting around that issue and they're not able to touch those trust funds. So, what are some of the other things that you think about when you talk about a testamentary trust and some of the benefits?
Yeah, no, I think you summarized it really well. I think, we always try to, bring the focus of this conversation back to what is the goal you're trying to accomplish. In the case of the testamentary trust, I think the primary goal you're trying to accomplish is preserving assets for your heirs that you think may be unfit to manage those assets themselves, appointing an individual or a corporate trustee who can manage those assets for their benefit. I love how you talked about the specificity of the distribution terms. Oftentimes some language, common language we see in those documents is the trustee may distribute for health, education, maintenance, and support. So very broad terminology that give the trustee the levity that they need to make those decisions in the best interests of the beneficiary. As opposed to some of the instruments we'll talk about, later in this discussion, the testamentary trust does not lose the step up in basis at the decedent's death. They still get the step up in their cost basis to the current market value as of their date of death. So it's a great tactic from that standpoint. As contrasted with some of the instruments we'll talk about later, the testamentary trust doesn't do anything for you from an estate tax standpoint. If you think you have a taxable estate, then the goal of this instrument, again, focusing on the goal of this instrument is not to reduce the size of your estate for estate tax purposes, because all those assets will flow through probate, will get the step up in basis, and will be included in your taxable estate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important for people to recognize. Generally speaking, the testamentary trust doesn't do that. There are types that can do that we'll get into, but the sort of testamentary trust on a very basic level that we're talking about, you don't want to be counting on it for saving in terms of estate taxes. That is an important point.
Yeah, and contrasting it back with the revocable living trust, we highlighted the RLT's benefit in providing for your incapacity. Testamentary trust, conversely, doesn't really add any value from that standpoint because it doesn't come into effect until your date of death. Yeah.
But there can be issues where there's incapacity in that period of time before a trust beneficiary is able to take the trust assets in full. And so even then, there can be some benefit to that. But you're right, without knowing that ahead of time, there's no way to plan for that, unless it's something that comes up after the fact.
Right. Great point.